But Shirani, these episodes are so deep, and sometimes they stir up a lot of shit. If you sometimes have that thought as you're listening to the podcast, then I invite you to keep listening because we are going to address that. Welcome to the Fierce Authenticity Podcast. I'm your hostess, Shirani M. Batak, and I teach you how to have amazing relationships by doing one simple thing: dismantling supremacy culture's internalized oppression and conditioning. Be sure that you've hit subscribe to the podcast and come on over and join me in my private newsletter community, where I have a collection of specially curated tools to get you started. Simply visit www.shiranimbatak.com/connect to get started. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited that you're here with me after a bit of a break, having had an opportunity to get refreshed and recharged for myself, and breaks and rest are so important. Supremacy culture would lead us to believe otherwise. Supremacy culture would lead us to believe that we have to be in constant productivity, that we have to be constantly in motion, that we have to constantly be going. And so in a world that is based on these systems of supremacy and based on these systems of really machinery, I heard on a coaching call earlier today where the coach likened it to where humans were meant to be machines. I mean, literally, that is the system that we live in. So in a system that was built around humans not being human, but humans being productivity machines, it is quite radical for us to be able to rest, to be able to recuperate, to be able to relish and enjoy and find pleasure in doing abso-freaking-lutely nothing. And so it was really nice for me to take that time off. And today, what I want to share with you are some thoughts around what has come up, what I've heard from others as it relates to the podcast and the episodes that you hear here, and how they might impact you and ways to actually take care of yourself. A little bit of background about me. I have an astrological placement in my astrology. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but there's something in my natal chart that blows humans away, especially humans that are healers and humans that know a thing or two about astrology. And what they say is, wow, this is some deep shit, and you're here for some deep stuff. And what it is, I'll just share it. Actually, I think I can share it. It doesn't feel super private that I can't share. But what I have is this conjunction. That's what it is. And it's Pluto conjunct Moon. And I didn't understand what all the hype about that was several years ago when I looked into it, or when, people were like, oh my God, you have Pluto conjunct Moon. And I didn't think much of it, but since so many people were like, oh my God, I was in an energy healing training, go figure. So it was a room full of healers and astrologers, and they were all so excited about this. Like, people who knew a thing or two about it were so excited about it. And I went home and looked up what Pluto conjunct Moon means. And basically, it said you're either an exorcist or a depth psychologist. And I thought to myself, well, I'm a little bit of both. And so it's a good thing that I do what I do. And it gave me a chuckle, and I still get a chuckle every time I think back on it, because it is exactly what I do here. It is exorcising all of the ghosts, all of the stories, everything that is not you. It is truly exorcising and extracting all of that from you, and not extracting like in a, oh, we're going to make a beautiful essential oil out of this type extract. Not that type of extract, but literally pulling it out of you and exorcising all of the stories, the lies, the conditioning that is not the most fierce and authentic you. And usually those stories and what we're exorcising is how we have been conditioned for millennia by systems of supremacy and oppression, and how it has traumatized us, our brains, our bodies, our nervous systems, and how that shows up in our beliefs and our actions, our beliefs and our behaviors, really, how it shows up. So what I've heard from listeners is that sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to listen to episodes of the podcast. And sometimes we touch on subjects that, because that's just who I am. I go and play in those deep, dark spaces. I am not afraid of them. And so sometimes because we go into these deep, dark spaces, it can take a toll. And it can leave you sometimes feeling like crap. Sometimes maybe not, but there are times and there might be episodes that really hit you in some kind of way, and that can leave you feeling a little bit disoriented or a little bit grumpy or a little bit just out of sorts. And what I've heard from some listeners is that when they do feel that way, ultimately, thank goodness, they are able to pull themselves out of it. They allow themselves to be with it. They allow themselves to mull over and integrate, kind of releasing what is no longer helpful and like digesting and integrating all the nourishment that is helpful. And then they're able to pop out the other side and be like, wow, yeah, that was important. This was good. And it really shifts the way that they are experiencing things. And as I'm sharing this with you that I've heard from listeners, also I'll share a story. A similar thing is happening with my editor, who is, at the time of this recording, still working through her portion of the edits. And what ended up happening with her is she actually told me one day, she literally told me that if I were not paying her to read this manuscript, then she literally would have set it aside, put it on the shelf, walked away, and not come back to it. And it's not because the material sucks, and it's not because the writing sucks. It's because the writing and what's being shared and the stories that are being told are taking us into some of the deepest depths of the shadows in our human psyche. All of those things that we have shoved into the deepest, darkest reaches of our brain because they're too painful, too traumatic, too tragic to look at and to deal with the tools that we've had in place. So because of that, she says, yeah, there is just stuff that is getting stirred up. And she's had to really pace herself and go through, which when the book comes out, I encourage all of you to read it with that same mindfulness, gentleness, slowness, and take your time with it. Same way with these podcast episodes, actually. I don't know that binge listening is a good idea, but hey, you do you. But the point is, she said to me that it is just stirring up so much in her. And this is coming to me right now, so I'm just going to say it, like almost like I'm kind of like an agitator in terms of I am going to agitate those things in you that are laying there unaddressed but waiting for your attention. And so when sitting there kind of agitating and stirring up this stuff for you, and of course, I'm not agitating it like the washing machine, making it super swirly and like blah, where it's a total hot mess, but it's just this gentle stirring up, almost like just this gentle rocking back and forth to loosen up some of these patterns and see like, what does this stir up in you? Like, so that's what it's pretty much doing. That's like the way that I work in a lot of ways. And I didn't realize that till I'm speaking it right now to you. So listen to that. You're getting to hear this insight fresh, hot off the press, literally in the moment with me here right now. And so, yeah, she said that if I weren't paying her to read it, she would have put it on the shelf and walked away and not come back to it because of all of the discomfort that was arising in her. And yet, because I'm paying her to read it, she is, of course, following through with her contract and is allowing herself to stay present with the process. And she's taking notes and letting me know what's happening for her. And then the coolest thing happened. About 2 months after she started her initial read through of it, she says to me, "Shirani, the most amazing thing has happened. I noticed that I am actually thinking differently. I'm doing things differently. I am truly living in my fierce authenticity. And what I used to accept and what used to be okay is not okay anymore. I'm not okay with it, and I'm letting it be known. And I'm really just showing up in full ownership of my fierce authenticity, and that it's been amazing for her." And so similar to the listeners who have shared with me that like, oh shit, like these episodes can be really deep and can stir up some stuff, is if you allow yourself to be with the process, however, if you allow yourself to glean from it the gifts that are available, that are here for you, then you will pop through the other side. You will experience, even if the most subtlest of shifts, you will experience them. And they absolutely will change the way that you think, change the way that you feel, and rewire your nervous system to a new level and a new capacity and a new way of being. And technically the nervous system doesn't get rewired, the nervous system gets reattuned. So it will rewire your neural networks, which will reattune your nervous system. And you just have to allow yourself to be present with the process. And don't overdo it. And don't force it. Like I said, you probably don't want to be binge listening. But if that's what you do, then you do you. Just know that you might experience like a really big like crash and burn type, like, oh, like that was so heavy. And you might want to run away from the podcast too. And I encourage you though, to take it slow. To let these words really sink in. To let the messages land, to let these messages speak to parts of you that haven't been spoken to before or that haven't been given voice to allow what I'm saying here on the podcast, what I share on my Instagram and other social media channels, what I share in my newsletter, to let it all land and give voice to all of the things that you yourself have experienced or sensed or felt and you didn't have words for. And just allow yourself to be with it. Because that is how this process works. A little known fact, I'm actually a trained and certified energy healer as well. So in addition to be a licensed therapist and a coach and consultant and author and speaker, little known fact is I am also a certified energy healer. trained in the Sintara system modality. Formerly, it was known as source healing. And basically, what is happening when you tune into each episode of the podcast, when you read any post that I post on social media, when you open any of my emails and read them, what is happening is you are receiving an energy healing transmission. And sometimes that'll feel amazing, and sometimes it'll feel like shit. And my invitation to you is that you simply allow yourself to pace yourself and to stay with yourself and to be present even when you want to run away. And so that is my invitation to you. And before I go, I want to let you know that if you do not follow me on Instagram, then please do at Shirani M. Batak, because that is where I share most of my truth bombs, like literally almost every day. I'm sharing something over there, insights that come through, hits that I get, wisdom that wants to flow through. And so definitely follow me over there and click the notification bell so that anytime I post, it comes up at the top of your feed so that you can see what wisdom has come through that day for your healing. And get on my newsletter list. If you're already not on my newsletter list, what are you doing? Get on my newsletter list. Join me in community. I share things there that I don't necessarily share with the public. Some of the more intimate moments of whatever it is that I'm either processing and going through, or certain messages that I just don't share publicly. And so I invite you to join me in that private community. It is completely complimentary, doesn't cost you anything but your time and attention in reading it. And all the links are in the show notes. Where you can go, however, is www.shiranimbatak.com/connect. And that's how you can join me and connect with me in that private community. So, with that said, take really good care, and we will be together again soon. I want to take a moment to honor and acknowledge the amazing support team that helps make this podcast possible for you. Starting with Diego Velazquez, our podcast editor and the talented artist who created our custom music. Ana Olvina, my wonderful assistant who creates all of our beautiful graphics and the transcript of every episode, which you can find over at www.fierceauthenticity.com. Biana Sandich, who writes our amazing show notes and does it so well that I bet you couldn't tell it wasn't me. The talented Jillian at Epoxy Studios, whose photography is our cover art and pretty much every other curated image that you see of me on social media. My husband, who puts up with me when it's 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday night and I'm like, hey babe, I gotta record a podcast episode. Like right now. Is that okay? My higher power, whose divine wisdom flows through me to bring these messages to you. And last but not least, I want to thank you, my listener, so much for listening in. If you'd like to join the podcast support team, some ways you can do so are by rating and reviewing the podcast, sharing it with everyone you know, and, if possible, making a financial contribution through the link in the show notes so that you too can be part of the team elevating this podcast and making it possible to bring to other listeners like you. I'm sending you so much love, and we will be together again soon.